What's up, it's your boy 50 Cent. FightFan.com in the house. It's going down right here.
We're FightFan.com, Ace Freeman and Joe Bruiser here with the Canadian Power Hour with Canadian boxing guru Russ Anber. Russ, how are things?
I'm good, guys. Yourself?
Yeah, doing well. The summer went by really quick, so... Well, we wanted to start by asking you about the big middleweight, world middleweight title fight coming up here between Julio Cesar Chavez and Sergio Martinez. We thought maybe we'd start out by asking you if you could tell us when you first met Sergio Martinez and kind of how you evaluated him when you first met him and how he's grown to be the sort of pound-for-pound fighter that he is now.
Well, we had a chance to meet Sergio actually a year ago, August, when we went to training camp, to his training camp in Oxnard, California. And that's where I first met up with him and developed a nice friendship, and everything went well. And we had the first fight against Darren Barker, and then went back to camp again a second time with them for the Matthew Macklin fight. So this guy's a world class athlete. I mean, you're around. I've been around athletes my whole life and around fighters, but this guy takes training, to almost the next level, in the intensity that he puts into his workouts and the way he trains and the amount of times per day that he works out and how he does it. Everything he does is with intensity and with desire. He's a great role model for a lot of fighters as far as I'm concerned.
And a lot of people have him right up there with the best fighters in the sport. Like, do you think over the last couple years, couple fights, that he's definitely sort of moved up there now that he's got the unified middleweight title, or the sort of the undisputed middleweight title, if you will? And do you put him up there with the best fighters in the sport, in your opinion?
Well, I think you'd have to, based on his success, and the last two fights might not have been his finest hour, but he certainly did what he was supposed to do, both against Barker and against Matthew Macklin, while waiting for a big fight, and in this case, the Chavez Jr. fight. So, but when you think about the wins against Paul Williams and against Kelly Pavlik and the way in which he performed in those fights, I think you certainly would have to make him among the best in the business. No doubt about it. I think the guy trains like it, and he's a gentleman too. He's a classy guy who brings a good name to the sport.
And
I just wanted to. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to actually ask you. I was just watching the first episode of 24/7 yesterday with Chavez and Martinez, and you're speaking about Martinez's training. I was wondering if you could give me a gauge on how much of his training is actually focused on boxing and how much is just focused on his conditioning. It seemed like he was doing some, he was paddle boarding and cycling and all that sort of stuff. So I was wondering, being a guy who started boxing so late, how much does he actually focus on those aspects of the sport?
That's a good question. I know he does a lot of conditioning. Like for him, the conditioning is very, very important. He spends a lot of time on it. He works hard on it. I mean, if it was me, there would probably be times that I would want to spend more stuff on the boxing aspect of it. But I guess he seems to feel very comfortable in what he's doing. So it's difficult for me to evaluate that because I don't want to say something that that might not be correct, because obviously he has his reasons for doing what he does, but he's in great condition. I mean, his running is second to none. I mean, the guy could probably have been equally good as a marathon runner. I mean, he's that talented and that gifted in his stamina. Like, he can run for hours. His weight conditioning, his weight work that he does it with great intensity. And I guess his boxing, I'd have to say that if you ask me from a trainer's perspective, I'd have to say that his boxing is really more based on his natural ability more than on any taught or learned or skills or programmed skills. It's basically his athleticism that gets him through his boxing. So
that's kind of what I was getting at, I guess. Is it really seems to me like he's just a natural athlete, and him being in great shape and everything else seems to carry him quite far.
It does seem to carry him far, and I just wonder, could he be even better if his technique was was, I don't want to say more sound, because it obviously is sound at what he does, but I like fighters that show versatility and that are able to do a lot of different things, so me, I could see with the athleticism that he has, there'd be so many things that I would want to show that he's kind of just set in his ways about doing it his way, and it gets the job done, and he relies on his speed and his athleticism to do it.
What about Chavez Jr., Russ? I don't think we've had a chance to chat with you much about him, but early on in his career, he was kind of thought of as a bit of a sideshow by some people, and in the last year, he seems to really have picked up steam, and people are looking a lot more forward to seeing him step up like this. But where did you think he was at when he was a little younger, and now do you think he's sort of the legitimate threat people are saying?
I saw him when he turned pro. I saw him when he had, I don't think he had a half a dozen pro fights the first time I saw him. As a matter of fact, one of the first times I saw him, if I'm not mistaken, was on the undercard of Gotti Mayweather in Atlantic City.
Wow.
And I watched him then, and he was just a gangly kid, he just basically an ordinary kid, but I realized how young he was. And, it's funny that Chavez, that we're talking about Chavez, because he was the example that I used when I turned David Lemieux pro. This was the path that I wanted to follow. I understood, and it seems like the Chavez people understand very clearly as well, the importance of developing a fighter, the importance of a fighter maturing into a man, the importance of teaching a fighter the craft that takes years and years to learn. And unfortunately, there are so many people in this industry who don't understand that and think that they can get it done, no problem. They're knocking guys out, and they're on top of the world and they're great, and don't listen to the proper advice, and then their careers get derailed and sidetracked. And Chavez never wavered from that. They had a plan, they had a strategy, they were going to go through with that, much in the same way they're doing with Canelo Alvarez as well, and you're teaching someone the craft and teaching them the art of boxing and learning. And I think as a result of that, as a result of not having pushed Chavez, of not having taken any chances early, of making sure that he was developing, getting better, getting stronger, improving each day in the gym, as a result of that, he is now in this fight with Martinez, and actually, and the odds are making him almost even money in this fight, and people are giving him a legitimate chance, against somebody like Martinez, whereas a year ago, nobody was even giving him hope of a fight against a chance of victory against Martinez.
Right, yeah.
Sort of touching on where he's at and what you're just saying, Russ, like how big of a step up do you think this is for Chavez? I know his opposition's come along, but it seems like a jump from even who he's been facing to a guy like Martinez, who's faced Pavlik and Williams and even Macklin. I would say Macklin's far and above anybody Chavez has faced so far.
Yeah, with what you said, is this the right time for that jump, do you think? Is he ready?
Well, okay, let's, Andy Lee's no stiff.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Lee's a legitimate fighter in my opinion, and that was a pretty dominating performance against Andy Lee, although you could definitely see there were some holes there that Andy just couldn't take advantage of. There's no doubt about it. It's a major step up. My theory on this as to why, outside of certain amount of pressures that existed, my theory as to why this fight finally got made was that, I think they feel that Chavez has reached a point where he's going to be able to walk through whatever Martinez has to throw at him, and if he does that, he's going to be in a fight. Like this, Martinez is going to be in a fight. If Martinez starts to hurt him and starts to get to him early, and the punches start taking an effect, it could be a long night for Chavez. So I think this is what they're banking on, is that the size and strength of Chavez is going to make the difference from the halfway point on in the fight.
Martinez seemed to be implying in the HBO face-off that he thought Chavez was going to have trouble hitting him. Do you think, knowing Sergio's style, is that going to be the case in this fight? Is he going to be pretty elusive for Chavez to sort of come forward and find?
I think he's always elusive. I think that Barker hit him more than he probably should have. Macklin, I thought was a competitive fight, but I thought that, I thought that Sergio was controlling that fight, even on the rounds that he didn't win. I thought he was controlling the rounds. Chavez is bigger than both those guys, though. Certainly in mass, anyways. So it's you know what? You can make an argument, I think, both ways. But I think that he's going to rely, he's going to have to rely on his defense, because obviously he can't sit there and be a sitting target for Chavez, I should say. He can't do that. So he's going to have to use his legs, and he's going to have to use his defense, because I don't think he can afford to go into a toe-to-toe punch out with Chavez. I think that could be dangerous. I think the ability in him to win this fight is that he has to be able to hurt Chavez and get his respect, and make himself very elusive, and not sit there and be a target for Chavez's body shots or his hard shots to the head. I think he has to. I think there's no doubt about it. His defense has to be better than it's been probably in either of his last two fights.
You think? I mean, we've seen Martinez, one punch knock out Paul Williams, who showed a really good chin up to that point. Is that a good indicator of the power he carries? And do you think if he connects flush with Chavez, who's going to be 180 pounds in the ring and is showing a really good chin, is he going to be able to hurt him? I mean, in your opinion, does Sergio have enough power to hurt him?
I think he does. I really think he does have that kind of power. And just as a side note, though, I think what we have to realize is just how good and how tough Kelly Pavlik is. People seem to forget that, because people didn't give Martinez that kind of credit. Okay, he beat Pavlik, and they kind of some people said, it was a close fight, and I didn't see it as a close fight. But there were some people, including our friend Dan Rayfield, who thought it was a close match, and I didn't see it that way. I thought that Martinez dominated, and then when you see the one-punch knockout victory against Paul Williams, just makes you realize how tough Kelly Pavlik was to take those shots that he was getting hit with, blood streaming into his eyes, and just getting banged with bomb after bomb from Martinez, and took everything for 12 rounds. And I don't think people give enough credit to that. But there's no doubt about it that Martinez has more than respectable power. And I think the Williams and Zibik fight proved just how strong of a puncher he is. I think the fight plays out on Chavez's ability to absorb that and carry on, or absorb it and go into a defensive shell and not be able to deal with the speed and power of Martinez. I think that's where the fight plays out.